Hey vinyl community, it's Joel coming at you from Planet 13, and this is my July haul. Hope everyone out there is having an amazing summer. I certainly did, but one thing I learned is that I have to delete my Amazon app. There's just been too many good sales. Some albums that weren't even on my radar, but I saw the prices for it, and I was like, you know what, I gotta snag that while it's so cheap. And they weren't essential albums, so overall I grabbed probably 30 albums in July. I'm only going to show about 16 because the other albums are just kind of common stuff that you kind of see all the time, or their greatest hits. And, you know, they're great albums, but what I'm going to show is more in the vein of what I kind of collect. Anyway, on with this show. First album up is Aerosmith's Night in the Ruts. This is Aerosmith's sixth album, and it might be them at their druggiest peak. Like, they were on top of the cocaine mountain here. Joe Perry left halfway through the recording process. They had a falling out with their regular producer, and there was tons of in-band fighting. They even had a tour in between recording this album for a few months because they ran out of money. Apparently, Joe Perry owed the label $80,000 due to room service bills. Yet, it's Steven Tyler's favorite Aerosmith album, and it might be one of mine. I still have to give it a few more listens, but I just love the Shangri-La's cover of Remember, and I love No Surprises, which was actually covered by Janie Lane of Warrant for the Aerosmith tribute album. Next up is Aerosmith's seventh album, Rockin' a Hard Place, so this follows Night in the Ruts. With this album, both guitarists Joe Perry and Brad Whitford had left the band, and we have Jimmy Crespo on guitar. Thus, many people consider this not a true Aerosmith album. I think it sounds pretty good. It doesn't grab me like other Aerosmith albums, yet I've only given it 2 spins. I think after a few more spins, I'll appreciate this a little more. There are some good tracks on here. The last Aerosmith album I picked up is Pump. We have Janie's Got a Gun with a remarkable video directed by David Fincher, who went on to direct Seven, Fight Club, The Social Network, and Gone Girl. We have Love in an Elevator, The Other Side, which was featured in the movie True Romance, and my personal favorite, What It Takes. This is an Aerosmith album that I grew up with. This was my Aerosmith. The album before Permanent Vacation was super commercial sounding, and I think this album gets lumped in with that sound, but I actually find it a bit more raw. It doesn't have as much of the Desmond Child influence as Permanent Vacation had. Another part 2 in terms of Second Comings is Hey Stoopid. This is the Alice that really got me hooked on Alice Cooper. I had a couple albums before, which I loved, but that was my brother's Alice Cooper. This was my Alice Cooper. And it came out when I was 14, and I bought it pretty much the week it came out. Again, I was a dishwasher, so I'd come home and these Alice Cooper videos would be on TV. And this album is just a 14-year-old's dream. It featured Ozzy. We have Elvira, Steve Vai, and Joe Satriani doing a guitar solo together on one of the tracks. We got Mick Mars. We got Nikki Sixx of Motley Crue on a few of the songs. I saw the tour for this album, and it was fantastic. You can actually catch a glimpse of the stage set for Alice Cooper in Wayne's World. So a lot of now Alice classics on this album, like Hey Stoopid, Feed My Frankenstein, and this song was featured in the movie Wayne's World as well. But my faves are Wind Up Toy, which has like this catch ending with Steven making an appearance. Steven was one of the kids from the Welcome to My Nightmare album. And we have Love's a Loaded Gun. And I think my favorite song might as well be on Mars. And this features some amazing guitar work by Dick Wagner, who did many classic albums with Alice Cooper during Alice's original solo period. Another hit album is ACDC's Razor's Edge. This was how I was sort of introduced to ACDC on my own. Of course, I was familiar with their 70s and 80s hits from my brothers, but this, again, was my ACDC. This was a big video hit album for them. We got Thunderstruck, Are You Ready, Money Talks, and this album returned ACDC to their former glory, and it brought them back to selling out huge stadiums again. Overall, it's just a great album. I don't think it gets as much credit anymore. You know, a lot of people just love Back in Black and the 70s albums with Bon Scott, but this is a genuinely good album. A rare album I found is Anthrax's I'm the Man EP, and it's only 6 songs, but I had this on cassette when I was a kid, and it has 3 versions of I'm the Man, which is kind of a rap rock song, plus it's got some live cuts. One notable live cut is Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, a cover by Black Sabbath that they do. And I picked this up for $15 just the other day at my local record shop. The store clerk was amazed at it was even there, and she commented on how every time they get like a metal album like this, Anthrax, Slayer, whatever, she says it's always in great condition because metal fans, they just take great care of their albums. I guess that's true because this album sounds great. Again, I had this on cassette as a kid, and I used to listen to this a lot while I'd walk to work. And I haven't heard it in 30 years, but man, do I remember listening to it like it was yesterday. Up next is Station to Station by David Bowie. This album usually cracks the top 5 of people's favorite Bowie albums. In fact, I've seen it as people's number 1, beating out Aladdin Sane or Ziggy Stardust. During this era, Bowie was gloriously coked out. He was just a living mess living in LA. And he adopted this thin white duke persona, and he was living off mountains of cocaine as well as a diet of milk and peppers. That's all he ate and drank was milk and peppers. This album features a still on the cover by a movie Bowie was just coming off of filming called The Man Who Fell to Earth. This is a transitional album for Bowie, as gone is the more plastic soul of Young Americans, which was the album that came before it. And he hadn't really started playing with the electronic soundscapes of Low that came shortly after. With only 6 songs, this is a short album, but each song is fantastic. Standout hit tracks are Golden Years and the Wild is the Wind cover. From one of Bowie's best to one of his worst, we have Tonight. This is usually considered Bowie's worst of the worst, even though it's sold platinum. It was a good seller for Bowie. It features many covers, mostly Iggy Pop covers. He also does a God Only Knows cover by the Beach Boys. But this is such a commercially pop-sounding album. I think Bowie was looking to find a new audience. He came off Let's Dance, and I guess he just wanted to go more commercial. I don't know. I've only spun it twice. I don't really like it. When I listen to it, it kind of sounds to me like this album would fit right in on the, I don't know if you've ever seen it. There's this movie called Jewel of the Nile from like 1986. It stars Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner. And this album just kind of sounds like it'd fit right out on that soundtrack. There's also a song on here called Tonight that features some vocals by Tina Turner. I just find this album lacks the creative innovation that we just love Bowie for. Another bottom of the barrel Bowie release that, it's usually in the worst 5 Bowies is Never Let Me Down. I think this is a step above Tonight. I like it a little bit more. I've only spun it twice. I think I'll like it more. Both these albums do sound great. Like, they're listenable. They're just not the Bowie that I like. That doesn't have the Bowie charm for me. And I'm not sure why. And again, this was a great selling album for Bowie, and it did well. And he had a really spectacular tour that was incredibly theatric called the Glass Spider Tour. But I think Bowie knew something had to change because he went on to form Tin Machine after this. And we wouldn't really get that innovative and creative Bowie back until maybe the mid-90s. I also find Parlophone, the record label that puts these out, this is the 2018-19 reissue, they're kind of cheapening out. In the original releases, like with Station to Station, you saw it came with an anti-static sleeve. These don't. They just come with like the original mock-up of the original sleeve. Here we have Dio, Lock Up the Wolves. Perhaps my favorite cover art for a Dio album. I guess I like wolves or something, and this album's kind of creepy cool. I was hesitant to pick this up as many people slam this as one of Dio's worst. Dio revamped his entire band, and he got an unknown 17-year-old guitarist on it. I heard it was more of a bluesy, slow album, and people find it boring and metalcore, but I actually dig this album quite a bit. I've spun it once, and it sounded great to me. I guess I just like Dio's voice a lot, so maybe that's why I love this album. There's a song on here called My Eyes, which is it's worth the price of this album alone. Again, I've given it one spin, and I expect to like it even more. This is the Rhino Records release from 2018. It's a reissue, and it's on gray vinyl. Next album up is Ace Frehley's solo album. This is a picture disc. Not much to say here. I had it on cassette as a kid, and now I have it on vinyl. I didn't really want the picture disc, but this was like $23, and it's about 33 Canadian for me otherwise, so I went for the picture disc. It'll look great on the wall. It sounds fine as far as picture disc goes to my ears. This is considered to be one of the best Kiss solo albums and one of like Kiss's best albums. And there are a lot of great tunes on here, but I think I could go the rest of my life without hearing the New York Groove again. as I'm just sick of this, and for some reason the song reminds me of this Cadbury Easter cream egg jingle.
Easter's coming, bringing a treat, a Cadbury favorite, something you eat. Cadbury's Easter cream eggs.
Nothing else tastes anything like them. Cadbury's milk chocolate makes up the shell, rich cream of vanilla, and the most delicious golden candy yolk any egg ever had.
They're in the stores now, but they won't be long. Just until Easter, then they'll be gone. Cadbury's Easter cream eggs. Ooh.
You can get them wherever you buy candy bars, but just until Easter.
Here we have Kiss' Crazy Nights album, and this is probably Kiss's most commercial sounding album. Basically, Kiss looked around and saw that Bon Jovi, who used to open for them, was outselling them. I guess they got competitive, and they have a lot of co-writers on this one, like Desmond Child and Diane Warren, who later on had a huge hit with Aerosmith's I Don't Want to Miss a Thing. Gene was no longer acting, but he still wasn't that active in the band, as now he was a music label Mongol. And apparently he wrote 23 songs for this album, but I guess they're all kind of garbage. There's one or two good Gene songs on here, but mostly it comes down to Paul Stanley carrying the weight of the band, I think, in terms of leadership. We have Bruce Kulick on here on guitar. We have Carr on drums. Eric Carr is a maniac. Some of the best Kiss drumming is on this album. Bruce Kulick's guitar work is phenomenal. Paul's vocals are amazing on this, but he is just coming out of the gate too strong, I think. If you've ever heard the tune Crazy Crazy Nights, you'll know what I mean. He's sprinting out of that gate, and there's nowhere up or down. He's just full force singing his heart out. And I think that's kind of a problem with this album for me, because there's no build up, there's no pacing. It's still an okay album though, if you have an open mind. Again, this is considered one of Kiss's worst albums. I was hesitant to get it because I only knew a few songs on here, but most of the songs are good. There are some bad songs on here. We've got some keyboards on this album, which is, I think, the first time Kiss played with keyboards. Most of the Gene songs aren't that great, although Hell on High Water I like that song a lot. Reason to Live is a great ballad. I'll Fight Hell to Hold You. It's pure cheese, but I love it. The final Kiss album I picked up is the Millennium Concert. This was recorded in Vancouver on the eve of December 31st, 1999. I was at this show, so I shelled out the $40 to pick this up on vinyl. I'm not a guy who loves New Year's, but being 22 at the time, I was just at a university and I wanted something epic to do. So me and a few of my buddies, we flew across the country and we went and saw this show. And it was a great way to ring in the year 2000, which it's almost 20 years ago. And I remember this night quite well. I never took part of the Satan's Lettuce during this show, although there was a lot of that going on. And it does kind of affect you, so the concert is a bit blurry. I didn't drink because all my buddies got drunk, but I didn't drink because I'm like, I want to remember this. I know this is never going to happen again. All the original members of Kiss playing. It's the Millennium. This is like a one-in-a-lifetime event. There's a few songs cut out of this. I can't remember what they are. I could have looked it up, but not that important. And of course, there's a lot of editing because this album sounds tight, and I don't remember the band being that tight during the show. They were tight, but they weren't this tight. Mostly classic Kiss on these tracks, but we do have some more recent tracks like Psycho Circus and Into the Void, and we have Ace and Peter doing some guitar and drum work on Heaven's on Fire and Lick It Up, which is kind of cool. A bit of a disappointment is that this is reissued on vinyl, but it's not on a gatefold like the other live albums, and there's no goodies inside, like there's no poster or inner sleeve. It's just the records. And the records label reasoning is that they wanted to emulate what the album would have looked like in the year 2000. I think this is a BS excuse. I think they could have put a little more effort into this. A band you don't hear about too often in the vinyl community is Sisters of Mercy. This is like a goth dance rock band with Bowie-like vocals. Kind of like Bauhaus, I guess, a little more danceable. And it's complete cheese. It features some crushing guitars with over-the-top female backing vocals and a drum machine. But I eat this stuff up. I love goth rock. And it just reminds me of my youth because I used to go these alternative nights, which took place in a giant warehouse. You'd cram all these kids in here who are just barely of drinking age. And they play Sisters of Mercy like this. It's goth rock. They play Nirvana, KMFDM, Beastie Boys, Ramones, Primus, Rage Against the Machine, Presidents of the USA. There's just a lot going on. So much variety. Like none of these bands sound like one another. And I don't think we'll ever capture that era again. A Canadian band from my hometown. This is Teenage Head. This is an album I just picked up the other day. This is a band that's always referred to as the Canadian Ramones, but while they are punkish, I wouldn't say they sound exactly like the Ramones. I'd say they sound more like the Stooges meets the Monkees meets Cheap Trick. They have a very punk rock look with their lead singer, and their sound's kind of punk rockish. Singer's name is Frankie Venom, and he was a maniac on stage. He wouldn't cut himself up and smear peanut butter on himself like Iggy Pop, but he would just dance around the stage and do crazy things without missing a cue. When it was time for him to hit the mic, he'd be right there. Then we had a guitarist and bassist with long hair and flared jeans, which was unheard of in punk rock. And all the musicians had their own kind of special stage stance, like Johnny Ramone would or Joey Ramone would, and they kind of look like Cheap Trick, and they're precise like Cheap Trick as well. And all these guys were pals right out of high school. They formed this band in high school, and they just started playing clubs. And they're a club band for a while, like the Ramones. And suddenly they had a platinum album. And they played a free concert in Ontario Place. And they had a riot there, and they just made the headlines. And then they went off and finished the rest of the tour, but they had a car crash during the tour, and the guitarist was thrown out of the band van, and he was hospitalized for 6 months after. And this just sort of derailed him. He had a hard time coming back to the band. He'd come back for a couple years after, just play a couple songs on stage because that's all his body could do. He was still weak and he was recovering still. It takes a while after having spinal injuries. And then when they were recording their next couple albums, he couldn't be as innovative as he could because he'd be in pain and stuff. And yeah, they just kind of fell off the map, but they'd still play My City. So I saw them a lot growing up. I think they put out a few albums. I never bought them. I'm going to go back now and buy them, but I'd see them open up for the Ramones. The Ramones love this band. And I saw this band decades after they're huge. And they actually re-recorded some songs a decade ago with Marky Ramone from the Ramones on drums and Daniel Ray producing. My last album was another huge Canadian hit. This is Tom Cochran's Mad Mad World. I don't know if you've heard of him in America, but you have definitely heard his Life is the Highway song. This was a monster hit in Canada, and it was later covered by a country band or singer in the animated film Cars back in 2006, where it became another hit. I had this on cassette, but I threw it away in the 90s because I'd moved on to the CD era. I wish I didn't because it was a birthday present from my brothers when I turned 14. So I kind of wish I still had it just for nostalgia. There's a few other songs in here that are huge hits in Canada. We got No Regrets, Sinking Like Sunset, the Mad Mad World title track was a hit in Canada. And listening to this 30 years later, I forgot how much I love this album. This is phenomenal. And I forgot how much of an Aerosmith sound this kind of has. Like, this would fit in right in with Pump or Permanent Vacation. Even Tom Cochran, he sort of sounds like Steven Tyler of Aerosmith when he's belting out some of his ending screams. And this album also just reminds me about how much great music Canada was pumping out in the 90s. We had Blue Rodeo, we had Big Wreck, we had Big Sugar, Our Lady Peace, we had Tea Party, we had so much music, Bare Naked Ladies, and a lot of these bands did hit the States. I suppose we're still doing that today. We've got Drake and Bieber, and I kind of apologize for that because that stuff just isn't for me. But man, Canada was a great time for music back in the 90s. Anyway, until next time, cheers.